Bonnie Siegler from Sociology presents Framing Racial Equity in U.S. School Districts.
Why do well-intended approaches to racial equity in U.S. schools so often fall short? I'll argue today that one reason is a failure of framing. In the summer of 2020, after Minneapolis police officers murdered George Floyd for an alleged minor infraction, school districts across the United States released statements declaring publicly their commitment to racial equity. I study racial equity work in U.S. schools, so I wondered, what should we make of these statements? In my dissertation, I argue that these statements reveal racial equity frames, and these frames tell us how school district leaders approach racial equity in their school district, both the possibilities and limitations of these different approaches. But what do I mean by frame? Consider the experience of framing a picture. You point a camera lens at some subject and focus in on that subject. Other possible subjects around it become blurred or cut out of the picture entirely. We do the same thing when we write a policy statement. We focus on one framing of the problem, which drives the possible solutions we can take to address that problem. Past research on racial equity work in U.S. schools has mostly focused on one or a small number of schools or districts, in part due to discomfort speaking publicly about racism, requiring a slow approach to data collection. Because of these statements, I'm able to take a big data approach and use computational text analysis methods to measure the frames in racial equity statements from over 1,400 school districts in the United States. I find several frames based on these models, but today I'll speak about two. The diversity frame argues that school districts need to address racism by teaching students to celebrate diversity. One statement said, "We aim to teach students to appreciate individual differences." This statement contrasts drastically with a statement using what I call the power frame. The power frame suggests that school districts, as one district statement put it, should, instead of looking out the window to look at racism, could look in the mirror. This statement said, we should teach students not to be afraid when they see a Black man simply because he's wearing a hoodie. And while this statement may make people uncomfortable, we can also see how this kind of statement and this approach to framing racial equity may lead the school district to drive policies that actually could change the levels of racial inequality in our country, including what led them to making this statement, the police killing of George Floyd. And so, while racial equity has long eluded well-intended policymakers and leaders in education, I argue that part of this is because these leaders fail to frame the problem expansively, and my dissertation offers a different frame to drive meaningful solutions. Thank you.